Earlier, I was just playing Fela Kuti, the king of Afrobeats, his song Gentleman. And the chorus says, I no be gentleman at all, I be African man, original. You know, there are many of us who find ourselves deeply angry at the history of African people. Many of us are deeply ashamed. A lot of us say that we should move on from history, the horrors of the transatlantic slavery, the brutality, the ripping away of a people from their land, stripping away of their language, cultural, and spiritual practices. People who were given new names, new gods to replace the ones they had before. But history is still important. Doesn't matter how uncomfortable it makes us. It can and it does serve as a compass to show us who we are, where we've come from, where do we stand now, or evolution. It can help us to solve many problems. Look at what Dr. Sebi did by just going back to African history, looking at the herbs we used, looking at the ways we healed ourselves. And many other healers do the same. They go back into our original indigenous practices to address some of our current issues. So there is no doubt that history is an excellent teacher. And most, if not every member of the human family uses it to their advantage, whether through propaganda, through political violence, to justify their current occupation of other people's land. Almost every ethnic group on this planet uses history as a way to position themselves for power or stability in the modern world. So, what is masculinity in the context of history? Masculinity is broadly defined as the qualities or appearance, traits or attributes that are traditionally associated with men or boys. But whose tradition do we look to see what these qualities were, what these attributes were? What is the history of Black men prior to slavery and colonialism? What were their unique traits or attributes that we could classify as Black masculinity? Did young Black boys, young African boys, did they have a rites of passage? What did it look like? Who is Fela Kuti referring to when he says, I be African man, original? Always when we are discussing white femininity or when we see Black women straightening their hair, wearing certain makeup trends, hair color, we are quick to point out that that's not Black femininity. It seems that we have an easier time in identifying what white femininity is versus what Black femininity is or should be. Whether it's hair, as I said, makeup, even just philosophies like feminism or becoming a boss babe, a corporate baddie. We are quick to point out the many ways in which the standard of femininity that the world ascribes to, at least the Western world, is white femininity. But rarely does anyone point out the effects of white masculinity on Black men and the ways in which Black men have either forgotten, defiled, or replaced their own masculinity with their former slave master's masculinity. Is it because we are being misguided? Black masculinity didn't exist? Or is it so deeply ingrained in our psyche? Is white masculinity so deeply ingrained in our psyche that we can no longer differentiate it from any other type? Is it that to be a man is to be a Western man? a follower of an Abrahamic religion where the God is male, head of household, women are inferior. When the black man says that he built the world, we built the world, who is he talking about? The we. It reminds me of when Malcolm said, we sick massa. Who is he talking about? We built the world. Capitalism, a system of domination by the few over the many, rape of natural resources for personal gain, the alpha male idea that the strongest must survive and has the right to beat up on and dominate the weaker. This is who black men are lumping themselves in with when they say we built the world. And worser still is that it appears that they have bought into a type of masculinity that dehumanizes them, doesn't even see them as men. So now the apex of masculinity is Don Corleone and his family of well-dressed thugs and violent brutes. What is the effect of this when the men you idolize call you a chimp? What's the effect on Abrahamic religion, on a group of men who came from a culture where deities were both male and female? And how can the black woman heed the call, the righteous call, the sensible call to honor the divine black feminine within herself if her counterpart is imitating his oppressor? My 2 cents and a few things for us to contemplate as we discuss this topic this evening. Welcome you all. Thanks to those who have joined on stage. I am eager to hear your thoughts on this issue. Leighton, I see that you have joined us. What are some of your initial thoughts on this topic? Do you think it's true?
Well, firstly, what a riveting and profound opening. And I have nothing more to add except to say that I think the Black collective has more or less resigned itself to the fact that capitalism and, excuse me, I'm on the road, the global capitalist order is like the end point of human history. And we just have to somehow work ourselves to some place of accommodation, prominence, and the delusional will think dominance within this order. And in order to be a good global capitalist, one has to behave like Alexander the Great and the other white men that Western history venerates. We have to accustom ourselves to the institutions that global capitalist uh, capitalism venerates. And so, in order to feel some pride that we can measure up with them, we have to adopt their ways in order to sort of beat them at their own game. And with each success, quote unquote, in that endeavor, we erase ourselves. And of course, we're no further ahead collectively than we ever were. All we have is a bunch of P. Diddy's and so forth wreaking havoc.
LOL at P. Diddy reference, but so true. You know, I often wonder, is there even such a thing as black masculinity? Is it that it has been completely removed from our genetic memory or psyche. And I get especially concerned because when you hear men and women, black men and black women, talk about what it means to be a man, their reference point is always the Caucasian male. Whether it's in a religious context, a political context, even down to grooming, we see where a lot of the so-called pro-black institutions and pro-black men are obsessed with wearing white or Eurocentric styled suits. We see it in the Nation of Islam. You know, how far have we come from when Michael Manley, former Prime Minister of Jamaica, says, you know, I'm gonna wear a bush jacket, even just to show that we're not aligned. We can be men in our own right. We don't have to align ourselves with this. Like, is it that people don't know what black masculinity is? Leighton, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that. If black masculinity exists or existed, it must have. But it seems as though we don't know it. Or is it that masculinity is just uniform across all ethnic groups? Because that is how it would appear based on the rhetoric that we hear coming from pro black male speakers, coming from the black manosphere. You know, it's it's as though there is no differentiation when it comes to black men. Leighton, you wanted to respond to that?
Oh, yes, indeed. That is absolutely true. Um, the the especially the talented, excellent black man wants to reach the apex of the system, but it's a white problem. So he tries to ape the white man as much as possible. His style of dress, his mannerisms, and especially the way he treats black people. So it's a complete. It's like and it's so funny though. The retentions that still exist. I was on Facebook a few years ago, and I saw a black American writing that he was surprised when in Africa and walking down the street, and African men would nod to him, and he would nod back, and he said he thought that nod that stranger black men gave to each other was a black American thing. And I laughed to myself reading it because I thought it was a Jamaican thing. And what the post was saying is that it really is an African thing. You meet, you're walking along the road and you're crossing paths with a man and you exchange nods. Um, so, but for the most part, we don't even recognize the retention. We don't recognize the things about us that are wholesome. We're just in a mad rush to be the up top boss, which is a white boss. You know, at some point,
Very
Keish,
true. Very
we have
true.
to. We just have to make up our mind. Enough of us. Make up our minds. Are we going to? Are we going to try to flourish in the system, or are we gonna try to overturn it?
I see Michelle has written in the thoughts in the chat. Is it though? Is the concept? I'm assuming she's referring to the concept of the up top boss. But it goes back to what I was saying in the beginning, that so much of what masculinity is has been defined through Eurocentric lens that we don't even know, we can no longer recognize a difference. Is what I'm saying? We no longer understand there is a difference between African masculinity, black masculinity, and white masculinity. White masculinity has become the default. That is what it means to be a man. That is what it means to be a boss. Michelle, you wanted to respond? Welcome again, by the way.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
Oh, I was trying to put in my headphones, but it's not so tuning. So, um, yes, I do agree with you that it's used as the, the epiphany of success. I see it all the time. And it's the same thing. I know we're talking about men, but it's the same thing that goes for women as well, right? And it always baffles me because I'm laughing to myself and my heart breaks at the same time, where it's just like, where's your sense of identity? Um, but the reason why I said is it though is because when you think about the fact that majority of the spaces that we need to flourish in, right? For areas of society, the country within you, where you live within, um, it's mainly controlled by those people. Let's be honest. It's mainly controlled by them. And so there is that um, understanding that there are things that you have to learn and adapt in order to succeed. And I think in this case, it's because of that lack of we having our own ecosystem when it comes to different areas, right? So take for example us having um I don't know, just using the movie industry, right? Us having our own studios, our own every single thing along the lines we have, and we're the boss, or we're the what I like to call, we're the sponsors, we're the owners of those things, and we don't have to go to someone else for funding. We don't necessarily have to go outside of our community for funding or sponsoring, or having the actors or whomever the case may be. But right now we're in a space where we can't. We truly cannot exist without collaborating with them in this day and age. We just can't. And so I think there's that area where it is always going to be at this juncture necessary for um I'm trying to figure out if it's technically assimilation or conformity, which which word is best. Um, and while I will say there's nothing wrong with it, for someone who works within that space, that's where I've that's what I grew up in. But the difference between me and others is that I understand that this is a space that I exist within to do certain things. Once that is done, I'm out of there. Or while I'm in that space, I remind myself that I am a, black woman in that space. I'm not a white woman. You're not going to get me wearing a wig. You're not going to get me wearing this. I remember I used to straighten my hair, and out of, just literally saying to myself, what am I doing? What am I doing? So I make it a point when I'm in the videos, when I'm in the photo shoot, whatever it is, I am wearing my hair natural. This is me. So, to the point I think Lena had touched upon is that we don't go in that space and just exist the way we are. We conform. And for me, I see where it's at 50-50 again, trying to figure out whether or not it's a case of assimilation or conformity, where because we don't truly have our own ecosystem where we can exist, and they have to acknowledge our existence and acknowledge our power and acknowledge all of these things. um we find ourselves, and many people find themselves losing their identity without truly even knowing. I don't know, I cannot speak for people, but for me, I make it a point. I can only speak for me. I make it a point to say, listen, this is Black Michelle. This is what my hair looks like. If you don't like it, don't look on it. Don't you dare comment on it, because I don't comment on how your hair look like or whatever the case may be. But you go there representing, I go there representing my culture. And unfortunately, I do see men in that space. I can't even begin to tell you stories about what I see. And I'm like, whoa, yo, you really? That's what you, okay. Um, but I don't know. I'll leave it for the. I'll stop right there for now, because I still can't understand the mentality of people who do that, when to the point again that Leighton made, is that we should be building, we should be going there and representing, but we don't. Not all of us.
But you see, Michelle, I think you made a critical point about the acknowledgement of a thing. It would be one thing to say, I acknowledge that this is not my culture, this is not my way of life, this is not who I am. However, I code switch or I adapt this language, this mode of operandi, this costume in order to function in a specific space for a specific reason. And that is why I said in the beginning, it's easy, and we hear it all the time. It's easy for societies to say, take off that white woman's wig, because it's openly discussed. Everybody talks about it. Everybody can clearly identify what white femininity is. No one seems to know what white masculinity is, because masculinity is treated as a broad brush that covers everything that is manly, aggression, alpha male, domineering, top dog. People don't realize that that has nothing to do with black masculinity. And so I fear that when you don't acknowledge a thing as being different from you, it's as you said, it's like an actor playing a role. You know that you're going in to play um, the president of Haiti, and so you have to talk like him, you have to dress like him because you're playing a role. But when you think you're actually him, that's called insanity. When you think that to be groomed and to look respectable, you have to, like the Nation of Islam, wear bow ties. That's mental illness. And to your previous point, that we don't control things or we don't have our own. I'm not sure if that's true. Certainly, we had it before integration, but we want it to be integrated. Is it that we don't have it, or because we crave their acknowledgement? We crave their wealth, quote unquote, there. We want the respect that comes from what men see on Godfather, the mafia style behavior. We want that type of respect and domination, as opposed to the communal respect that we see when we look into our history. Leighton, am I off base in thinking that it's not that we don't have it, but that we're not satisfied with who we are?
I think you're 100% right. I don't see how you can have billionaires like Michael Jordan, Tyler Perry, um, Rihanna, you name the black billionaires who and multi-millionaires who, if having our own studio is a problem, how much does it take to start a studio? Most of the talent
I
is
believe
black, eh?
Tyler Perry now has his own studio, Leighton. If I'm not mistaken, Tyler Perry recently built
Yeah,
his
but
own
but
studio.
every time I hear a black person on any show, they're still talking about how they can't get any roles.
Right. And sorry,
Every
sorry.
every time I tune in, I hear about how difficult it is to get roles, and either you're typecast into this or that, or your role is limited. You can't just be a black doctor. It has to be a black doctor who is um undergoing some stress because of blackness. He can't just be. There's a book, I haven't read it and I really have to read it. It's by black American black masculinist scholar called uh Curry, Dr. Curry. I forget T Curry. I forget what the T is for. But his book is called The Man Not. And if you listen to the black, what they call it, the black exploitation movies of the 70s and the literature of that time, they always refer to the system as the man. And the man is a capital M. Man, the man ain't gonna allow you to do that. The man this, the man that. And the man is the white guy at the top, or the group of white guys at the top. And you just are not the man. Anything you can do to be the man is at the behest or by the leave of the man. And so when you are working with that kind of system, then you are essentially deprived of your manness. You see? So, but let me tell you what shocked me, Kishi. You remember the NFL protest where this fellow Kaepernick was kneeling and it got the whole thing into a tizzy and inflamed the whole American right wing and so on and so forth. But when it came down to solidarity among the black players, now remember the league is 75% black. I mean, these players could literally have said, you know what happened? You can't blackball this guy. We want all his demands met, else none of us will play. What could they have done in the face of that action? And but we just don't. I don't know. I don't want to say we don't have the gumption to do it, but we don't.
So, so Leighton, so you just proved the point that I was making is right. When you use the example of Tyler Perry and even Rihanna and the rest of them, right? Even Michael Jordan. Um, if you notice on Tyler Perry, yes, he just got his own production company. But before, if you look at his movie, you'll see Lionsgate. He doesn't own Lionsgate. Um, so there's a thing, right, that we have to, when we're talking, we're having this type of conversation, it's looking at power and money. Yes, they have the money, but they don't have the power. We may think that because they're a millionaire and they have, you know, um, what we think, a whole lot of assets and all that good stuff. But the reality is they don't control the power. And that's what I meant when I said that, about the sponsors. Many of these people, and in order for them to do anything, for any of them to be successful or their products to be out and all of those things, they still have to go in front of a boardroom of people who control the power. Um, and many of them does not look like you and I. They just aren't. Uh,
But Michelle, isn't that only relevant if you want to be a part of Hollywood? Isn't that only
oh,
relevant if
no,
you are
no,
trying to get
uh,
acceptance into
uh,
a special club?
no, no, no. That's one of the biggest misconception about um, the way how society works. And it's no, it is applicable in all areas of every single thing that affects us. Trust me on that one. I see it and I'm just like, some days I want to cry and say, boy, there's no hope, because if me at a certain level can barely manage. Imagine the regular folk that knows nothing about how their life to me sometimes is like a pawn. It's a game. And they talk about it, right? They openly talk about it like this is about power. So I was just watching a piece on 60 Minutes a few minutes ago, and they were talking about uh two stories. They had one with Rich Paul. If you guys are familiar with Rich Paul, he's LeBron's agent, right? And here's this person who, within his own right, is very successful. He does a lot of um, major changes within the industry to make sure that black players um, get the money that they should get, and be positioned in a space that they should. And he gets blackballed, and he gets blackballed even though he's come to the table smart enough, fast enough, quick enough to do what is necessary to bring the results
You're
that
going to get blackballed if you're coming to a table that you don't own.
exactly. And
So
even
why don't we build our own table?
that's my point. We need our own ecosystem where we are just, they are just collaborators. They are not dictators. They are not the power players. That's what we need.
I think what Leighton said earlier is very important in regards to what is power. This idea of we don't have power. I think we're extremely misguided when we say we don't have power. A lot of these multi-billion, trillion-dollar companies, they make their money off of black people. Nike, um, uh, Tommy Hilfiger, a lot of these brands are rich because of black people. It's not that we don't have an ecosystem, it's that we don't see our ecosystem as valid unless it's acknowledged by white people. We don't see that we can have an underground system. We can literally have an underground theater system where we show only black films and black people, the millions of us that support theaters, support cinemas, support Netflix, would visit them without even have to, we wouldn't have to attend one Oscar ceremony. In fact, probably the Oscars and the Grammys would cease to exist without our participation. So I fail to understand even when we look at industries like Nollywood, I fail to understand this concept that we are at their mercy if we don't ascribe to their values. No, we want to be them. We want to be acknowledged by them. Spike Lee jumped up like a little girl when he won his Oscar, when he was finally acknowledged by white folks, even though he was a legend in Black America long before then. We want to be inducted in the Hall of Fame. And because they are not inducting us in there, we say, oh, they're leaving us out. No, 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 no. Leighton, sorry, you wanted to respond?
Yes, I wholeheartedly endorse what you say, Keish. And the Rich Paul example is very apt for this purpose. Rich Paul is a nobody, come from nowhere. How did Rich Paul get to this position of fame and importance and influence? He was grandfathered in by the brilliance of LeBron James. He was LeBron James' sidekick, homie, from back in the day. And when LeBron decided to set him up as a sports agent, the league had to capitulate because no one wanted to get on LeBron's wrong side. LeBron was the king, the golden child. Right now, in his 20th or 21st season, LeBron is a billionaire already. Still playing for $1 million contracts and endorsements that him don't have to draw him contract money. So that's how Rich Paul, and for that reason, to speak of Rich Paul being blackballed is laughable. The amount of talent that Rich Paul has in his stable, courtesy of LeBron, is something that all managers they have to. Anytime you talk about trade deadline and what have you, any move that any team wants to make has to be curtailed, analyzed in line of who is in Rich Paul's stable. That's power. And every time people talk about power, I remind them about a political story. I think I mentioned it on a previous Truth Gangsters Clubhouse. Stalin became premier, the leader of Russia, or the USSR as it then was, by virtue of uh, getting the general secretary position of the party. The general secretary position was a position that no one wanted because it had no real power. The only power it had was to make appointments. That was all the general secretary did. So all ambitious persons who wanted the top job, no one wanted to get stuck being the general secretary. Stalin jumped at it. So he was the general secretary. All he could do was make appointments, and make appointments he did. All of his rivals were appointed to great postings far from Moscow. And when the last such posting had been made, the general secretary walked into the Kremlin. So, power is how you use it. And we are not using our power for exactly the same reason Keisha mentioned. As a matter of fact, when Keisha was talking about Spike Lee and them, I'm just thinking of the number of bleaching girls who um, have men that are begging them not to bleach. Men that are begging them, please, 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 sweetheart, don't bleach. And they bleach same way, and then they turn around and say, oh, man want bleaching girl. No, you want men who want bleaching girl. So, we don't have the power. We don't have the power. We prop up these industries. When they say, oh, basketballers don't have the power. The NBA is 90% black. Well, 75%. That's enough. So we are the backbone of all the industries that marginalize us. We become, we have cadres of excellent people that become fabulously wealthy. And rather than pool our wealth and say, well, listen, all our talent is making you all this money. We want to make this money for ourselves. We want to what have you. And we just can't do it. Why?
It's not really much different from these countries that send black women to take part in Miss World and Miss Universe competition and then have a uproar or complain that they're judged based on Eurocentric standards. The majority of the world is non-white. Why don't you start a African, Caribbean, Latin American beauty pageant if beauty pageants are your thing? But no, we want to be crowned as Miss World in a Eurocentric organization and pageant. We don't want to be crowned in our own pageant because what we really want is acknowledgement that we are good little illegitimate bastard children of Massa. That's what we really want. We don't want our own. Because as Leighton said, everything that makes up these organizations is made on our backs. If we were to simply pull away, they would lose their legitimacy tomorrow. If the black countries who enter the Miss World decide, you know what? The vast majority of the population of our women do not look like this standard of beauty. We do not wish to participate. Three-quarters of the contestants would be pulled away. And I'm not mad at them. I'm not mad at the white man for wanting to celebrate Eurocentric beauty. But it's ridiculous for a black country, a Latin American country, an Asian American country to try to fight their way into these organizations only to turn around and declare, oh, they're keeping us out. Oh, we're so powerless. It's nonsense. Your power lies in your participation and the fact that you want their nod of approval. Michelle, you want to respond?
Yeah, I wanted to touch upon something that Leighton had said. So, with regards to Rich Paul, that was not my opinion. That was his words. And when he said it to the reporter about him not being, um, truly represented, or not represented, sorry, respected based on what he has done, the comment then, was brought to LeBron, who was a part of the interview, and LeBron was like, "It's so unfortunate because, he has done great and whatever." Not my opinion. This was out of his own mouth, the way how he's treated in the space. So there's that. Um, with regards to power, so we're talking about power, and I want to make sure there's, the understanding in terms of there's different types of power, right? There's a soft power, there's a financial power, which wholeheartedly agree with you on that. We have the means to pull away and stop buying things that we don't need to buy or that doesn't support our community, but we don't.
No,
In
no,
terms,
no. I don't think we're talking about buying things. We're talking about creating industries.
I'm just using that as an
Oh,
example.
okay, okay. Sorry.
Applied all
Go ahead. Go
that's
ahead.
right. It's using that as an example, like buying things, supporting, going to the movies, whatever the case may be. I can tell you here in America, right? We did, in most cases, have a lot of our own industry. We had our own movie theater. Don't forget Magic Johnson. He created movie theaters, right? First person first black person in America to own movie theaters, um, and so on and so on. The problem that we run into, where a lot of them has since closed, are not supported, is because of just that. We don't support our own the way we support others. And that's where the ecosystem that many of us are trying to build falls apart. We don't get that support. Not that it's not there. So to the point you made about the pageant, Keisha, there are pageants, sparse, that exist, that are focused on our community. Do they get the attention and the gravitas that the Miss Universe or whatever? They don't. And so, unfortunately, because of our mindset and because of the influence, albeit TV or, you know, um, computers, whatever, it's ingrained in most people's psyche that what you see on TV, that's like the end all be all. And if you're not there, if I don't see you on TV, then you lack relevance. That's what you're working up against. So while I'm not saying we don't have the power. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm very much aware that we do have the means to stop buying the Nikes, to stop buying the Louis Vuittons. I don't I don't have any of those things because I don't see the purpose. It makes no sense. And we can, that's a whole different topic, but we don't. We buy these things, and one of the things they talk about, especially here in America, is like people buy these things to show that they have wealth when they truly don't. That's not wealth. And the unfortunate thing that we always come back to, why many of these things that were created back in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, they fall apart. It's because we are, as Black people, we don't support our own. We just unfortunately don't. So is there going to be a resurgence? I hope, of our culture, our own ecosystem being built back up. I hope that's the case. And I hope we do truly learn and support our own. So our money, our growth, our power rises within our community. I don't know. It's to be seen, but I can tell you I've seen all of the things that you guys, touched upon in my, through my own lens, and they die because we just don't support that.
Speaking of support, I want to really go back to the central topic, of black masculinity and the internalized self hatred of that blackness, that black manhood. One of the things I find interesting, right? When black men want to criticize the kind of men that are chosen in our community, there is a phrase that is used, and I find it interesting when they call other men pookies and raries. To me, first of all, the phrase was coined by a white man. That phrase, pookie and rary, is coined by a white racist man. But enveloped in that phrase, to me, is just a too much of a hint of classism and capitalism. The scorn that is given to the poor man, the man who wears his cornrows and typical, black fashion. This is what they are describing, the Pookie and the Riri. And it's so disrespectful. It doesn't honor our uniqueness as black people, the style, the swag, the inventions that black men have come up with, even in their position of poverty. And they love it. They flock to people like Kevin Samuels that tells you that in order to be a man, you have to dress in three-piece European suits. You have to wear European clothes. You have to drink the best scotch and brandy. You have to make X figures. Totally dismissing the black creative man, the black community worker, the black bus driver, the black garbage man. So there's this internalized hatred by even black men of their own. And this worship of the mobster type, the godfathers of the world, the Italian dons, the suits, the rum, the cigars, the close shave, the shave face. So the call is coming from within. Leighton, you wanted to respond?
Boy, Kish, just to say that you're so on point. Um, and what's distressing is that it seems to be worsening. If you look at if you look at the state of cinema, music, just expression, Black Power from the 70s, and we're in a state now where anything that somebody does that is anti-communitarian, anti-black, is lauded by the black community as that's okay, he's chasing the bag. What would you do, you know? Chase the bag. It's crazy. And I I don't want to be pessimistic, but I don't know what's to be done about it.
At some point, we're going to have to be honest. You mentioned earlier the creation of the P. Diddy's of the world. Yes, it's easy to demonize one individual, but as intelligent members of society, as critical thinkers, at some point we're going to have to analyze what does this say about us as a whole? What does this represent about us? This concept of black excellence. As I said before, the idea of the alpha male, the male that climbs upon everybody else, beats upon everyone else. The fittest of the fit survive, the strongest survive. He doesn't care about egalitarianism. He doesn't care about fairness, about community. As far as he's concerned, bigger, stronger, more violent, more alpha, he has the right to beat upon and take. I'm going to take what's mine. That's the attitude. And we are lying to ourselves if we don't think that this is rooted in capitalism and white male concepts of domination. And so, as you said, this idea of being the top dog, as being the don, as being the head, it doesn't come from you earning the role through the trust and love of your community. It comes from being a brute, being violent, abusing others, generalship, conmanship, getting over, employing people to do the majority of your work and paying them very little. That's what it means to be a boss in today's society. And we celebrate this. We celebrate it. We listen to the Les Brown stories and we worship this kind of approach to success. Tajay, welcome to the stage. What do you have for us this evening?
All right, good night, everyone. So I have many things running through my mind. You touched on the Diddy controversy. Also, I'm thinking about the fact that Jamaicans are paid. Um, well, I will say Jamaicans because some of the same entry level jobs here, when you go abroad and you hear the amount of money that they're getting. But I do understand that the U.S. is considered to be a first world country and Jamaica is a third world country. There's a difference, huge difference. But a Jamaican boss, quote unquote boss, as you'd have mentioned, is paying a grown ass adult $50,000 a month. $60,000 a month. What can that really do? Because I was having a discussion with a friend of mine. I think both today and yesterday, two different friends. And whenever I go on the road, when I have client meetings or whenever I'm running my business, doing my business or whatever, I always spend at least $15,000 on the road. Things are so expensive, at least 10,000, 15,000, and those are money that is money that I wasn't expecting to spend. Yeah, so I can just imagine if I go on the road 5 times for the week. It's 5 times the 15, 5 times the 10. So that would be what I spend in a week just on probably a coffee or green juice or on a lunch. That is what someone is earning in a month. That is ridiculous. That is ridiculous, man. It's crazy. And I mean, we can only talk about these things, it will not change. um that is the reason why you tend to find persons now in today's society, especially the Gen Z's, they are, leaning towards entrepreneurship. So yes, they are working a job, but they are, and you realize that they are even job hoppers too. And millennials, not only Gen Zs, but millennials as well, they are job hoppers. And because I've done many coaching sessions and such for persons, especially Gen Zs, and when I, ask them in the session, what's happening? Is it the salary? Is it the horrible boss? What is it? They're saying that as soon as they get disrespect, they leave. Some say that, at the initial stage of the job, the second interview, they were promised X amount, and after completing the 3 months probation, they are promised 30,000 extra, but after completing it, they didn't receive it or haven't received it, the amount that was agreed upon. So it's just crazy. That's pertaining to the low salary aspect of
But
things.
before you go on though, Tajay,
Hmm.
what you're saying is very, very relevant. And I want to explore that point a bit more. Because if we think about what minimum wage is, and we think about what the current standard of masculinity is, it simply means that majority of black men should be classified as pookies and raries, because the average black man won't be able to head a household, so to speak, or finance a household the way people like Kevin Samuels. And let's not even talk just limited to Kevin Samuel, because some people might say we are making light of something serious when we talk about someone as buffoonish as Kevin Samuels. But even if we look at leaders, men who talk about masculinity, religious men, political men, authors, thought people who provoke thought, when they describe what masculinity should be, they call the men that Tajay talking about as weak. Oh, you don't want to work hard? You're giving up? You're a chump. You're leaving a job just because you didn't get enough pay? You should stay there and suffer. That's the model that black men are sold. This idea that you stay and you make money from your computer, you become an influencer. A lot of men are told that this is feminine, and that the epitome of masculinity is to suffer and slowly climb up the ranks until you become a boss yourself and you are able to pay people minimum wage. Leighton?
Yes, indeed. The 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 black excellent man and woman, but let's deal with the man, especially since we're dealing with black masculinity, fails to understand that the system that he is trying to become a boss in, as he climbs the ladder, he must realize that where he's climbing from, the mass of people are black. And the system is set up so that its substratum is black. Slavery was created wealth on the backs of black people. And even in that system, there were wealthy black slave owners. So there will always be fabulous and wonderful and extraordinary and exceptional blacks to aspire to. That's the con, that's the game. So we all of us, genuflect, and everybody um, is invested in Diddy's success because he looks like us and don't want to see a wealthy black man nor a successful black man brought down. So we don't really care what he's done. We just want this image of success as black and aspire to it. and sort of ignore that it's simply a position of exploitation where you're exploiting blacks. It's not whites you're exploiting, it's blacks. Because blacks are the substratum of the system. In order to change it, you would have to say, all right, we want a system that blacks are not the substratum of. Or if they're the substratum of it, they're treated the best because they are its substratum. And we don't have that we don't have that mindset. And really and truly, all it takes is a mindset.
Go ahead, Michelle. Sorry, go ahead.
So, Tajay, I'm not sure if this is something that you want to do, but I would give you my advice as a proud millennial. Learn what and something that I learned from a Gen Zer, mind you, is I have a friend who he solely spends 2 years at a company. And the reason he does that is because he said after 2 years, if this company is not one, promoting me, not pushing me where I want to be, then I'm wasting my time. Because at the end of the day, I understand that I am a valuable resource, right? Because I'm guessing he's not interested in owning anything but using his talents and gifts. Now, this young man, super, super smart, works at the, the top tech company now in the world. But he got there by putting this tactic. And my advice to you, and it's something that I've had to adopt over the years. Now, the difference between me and you guys is I work in a predominantly, European environment where I'm usually the only black person in the world, in the room, black person in the apartment, black woman, whatever you call it. So I have a whole different challenge. And no matter how um you play the scenario, it's always about, as I think Leighton or Keisha said, you have to change your mindset. And what works is learning the game, so learning the environment and being tactical about what you want and your definition of success. And if it means that, you know what, after 2 years, I need to leave this place and go somewhere else in order for me to move up, then you just have to do it. I do understand that Jamaica is a different playing field. You may not have that, uh, ability to do it, but if you can, that would be my advice to anyone. Don't sit there and let them use you and tell you they're going to do this and they don't do it. They will run over you if given the opportunity.
So Michelle, so in other words, he should swap one master for a more benevolent one. I'm not I'm not following.
It's not about master. What I'm saying is you set your goal and your definition of success. Where do you want to be? Do you want to be an entrepreneur where you own your own company? Or if you're going to stick it out and work for somebody for X amount of time, so then you can build up funding, whatever the case may be. All I'm saying is about strategy and tactic. If you know you cannot own your own and you need money and you have to go and get a job, then make sure that the resource, which is your valuable time and body and energy, is not being taken advantage of. That's all I'm saying. It's not about master or what. It's about utilizing it and being smart.
Um,
That's it.
Kish,
Go ahead, Leighton.
okay. To Michelle's point, if you have a classroom with 50 seats and 75 students, and every student comes early, won't there still be 25 standing students? capitalism is set up so that all successful capitalists keep their costs to a minimum. And one of their major costs is the cost of labor. And the whole idea of capitalism, from slavery to prison population, prison work, etc., is to keep labor costs as close to zero as possible. This model is the model that black capitalists and entrepreneurs are following. And who are they doing it to? Of course, black people. They are already the least expectant, the most downtrodden, the most disadvantaged, and the most unprotected. So you just exploit your own. And the notion that each excellent entrepreneur, each innovative individual is going to somehow pull himself by his bootstraps and beat the system and become a boss in his own right and employ others to do what? Is he gonna be a good capitalist? If he's gonna be a good capitalist, then he's going to exploit them the way he was exploited. Only reason that he wasn't exploited was by dint of his own um, extraordinariness. How many of us are extraordinary? And why should we subscribe to a system where only the extraordinary among us can thrive? And thrive no less at the expense or to the detriment of the rest of us. Since his prodigious efforts at self betterment are not in a communitarian way, but in a very individualistic way, that is not just neutral to the community, but damaging to the community itself.
Oh, thank you, Leighton. I want to pick up on a point Michelle made earlier about this idea of, well, she didn't directly call it assimilation, but I'm gonna call it that for now. When it comes down to a matter of survival, do we give black men grace? Do we understand, accept, and acknowledge that in order to survive in a workplace where the standards of, let us say, grooming doesn't necessarily reflect black masculinity? Your shirt have to be buttoned up, your tie have to hang you, but they have to do that to feed their family. Again, we had a podcast show on Malcolm X, and we know that in his younger days, Malcolm X sported some dapper European suits. Obviously, he evolved to wearing more African clothing, but even Patrice Lumumba, a lot of our leaders wear Eurocentric suits as a way of going about their business undetected, unharassed, or just to instill some sort of male pride amongst younger boys that might be looking up to them. Is this a fair? Should we be fair and allow this? And even if we do, should it have a time limit? Do we say, okay, now you've made your own organization, your own company. We want to see less of this Eurocentric rules, policies, dress code. Anyone wants to respond?
I would say absolutely, Keisha. Again, my environment is exactly that, where myself And all the other folks that look like me that is in a predominantly white environment, we do. At the end of the day, we have our own definition of success. And we have, like, to your point, we have our mouths and our family's mouth that we need to feed. Do we not do that and starve? Absolutely not. But I do absolutely agree with you to the second point that you said, that at some point, right, you have to step away or recognize that this is just something that you do for this end result. Like I said earlier, when I'm at work, I know that there's certain things, certain way I have to speak, certain things that I have to do because that's the environment that I'm in. However, I never for once ever, unlearn or remove the identity of the fact that I'm Jamaican. That's it. That is it. End of story. But I give it to anyone in my position, especially men that have families to feed and to take care of. Absolutely. And I do say yes. At some point, they themselves need to, you know, open that door, leave that ladder for somebody else to be successful as well. There are times when they don't do that, and that's where I have a problem. Or the times where they just completely forget that, hey, I'm black, or hey, I'm Caribbean, or whatever, where they treat you like, no, 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 don't talk to me. You do have those that happens as well, and that's where I'm like, nah, that's not how it works. But I do absolutely, when you have mouth to feed, when you have bills piling up, talk to me about that type of thing, and then say, well, I'm not going to do this because it's for the betterment of what, when you're the only person that I've been the only person in the room where I am sticking up for my culture, I'm sticking up for black people, and nobody else, that crab in a barrel mentality comes in where they're like, you're on your own, there's nobody else there. So how do you then put that burden on somebody who's trying to feed their family, and they're going in there to do what they need to do to make sure they have a paycheck, a decent paycheck to feed their families, and then say, well, you sell out the community. Where's the community when I needed the strength? I needed the support. Nowhere.
Thanks
Um,
for that, Michelle. Go ahead, Leighton.
my own reservation about the feeding a family is that Diddy went way beyond feeding his family, and a lot of the people who are selling out are not selling out to feed their family. I mean, to feed their family subsistence ration. They're selling out to feed their family caviar, and the rest of us who are scrounging to actually feed our families are applauding this treachery and saying, "Hey, get the bag, get the bag. I'd like to feed my children caviar too." So, if we're honest with ourselves, we're not looking at a situation of survival and accumulation and so forth. Like, if we were doing it the way that you suggest, Keisha, which is the intelligent way that people who are under siege or at war would do, where they would wear a jacket and tie to work, but when they have their family gatherings, religious celebrations, whatever, community
But
events,
Leighton, we see it in Jamaica with the ethnic minorities. You ever go to a Chinese man or Indian man house on their special days or on their when they're not at work? They are respecting their unique individual culture. Doesn't matter if when they go to get a loan from NCB, they wear button up shirt. When it comes time down to celebrate the year of the dragon, they're in traditional Chinese clothes and they don't send their children to to Jamaican schools, typically. But sorry to cut you. Continue.
Thanks, Keith. That's exactly the point that I'm making. Exactly. So that if we are doing it because we are code switching, when do we get back on code? And if we are honest with ourselves, the biggest code switchers are not trying to get back on no code. They are just trying to become as white as possible. You know, it was a funny thing, for instance, for me as a young attorney to look at and listen to some of the judges on the bench at the time. Um, because some of them, there was one in particular, he was, you know, the butt of jokes all around the profession. Um, but he had a, British accent. And I would look at him speak or try to speak, and I look at somebody like Lloyd Barnett as well, and realize, like, I'm like, why do they do their lips that way? And I realized after a while it was in an effort to person, so that when they were speaking, their lips wouldn't look as thick as they are. So, and of course, it affects someone when you hear Lloyd Barnett speak. It affects the way he speaks because he's pursing his lips this way. It's incredible. Like, you can't be an intellectual, a black intellectual sounding black, a Jamaican intellectual sounding Jamaican. Even in exposition of English law, you have to look white while doing it and sound white while doing it as well. So, unless we see value in ourselves and take what is to be taken from this oppressive culture and use our retentions that we used against it then and that have sustained us till now to do something better or different, then we're stuck here.
You know, Dr. Amos Wilson, I one of the speeches he made, which I enjoy the most, spoke of the need for black men to remove, to kill the little white boy that lives within them, to exorcise the little black boy that lives within them. And I wonder, going back to what Michelle said, how would this be possible if every day we participate in a costume show, a costume party, where we get up, we put on the three-piece suit, the white wig in the case of the judges, certain some judges. We purse our lips to sound more like a English lord. How possible? At some point, you mimic and mimic and mimic until you find yourself becoming the thing. I think that's psychology 101. I see Tifari in the chat from Black Feminine Consciousness, and it sounds to me like a form of manifestation, a form of, as Jamaicans would have said, calling down something on yourself. If every day you dress as a thing, speak as the thing, admire the thing, how can you then realistically be expected to oppose it?
Kish, I agree with you 100%. And every time I hear people talk about you can't change the system from outside, who says? Show me systems that have been changed from the inside. Show me systems that Show me a system that has never been changed from the outside. The whole idea of systems is to get the people in the systems to conform. And there is a certain level of conformity that rises beyond conformity to complicity. And once you have passed that threshold, and systems are systems are self-perpetuating and self-reinforcing. So they move you from conformity to complicity very rapidly and very forcefully. And then after a while, you become part of the system. And telling your children and grandchildren that you can't just say, you have to be part of the system. You have to understand how things work. You have to move gradually. You can't upset the system. You can't overthrow the system. This is why, for me, every time I hear people talk about reparations, I die laughing. And say, oh, reparations is serious stuff, Leighton. We need our reparations. I just humor them and say, how much reparations do you think we need? Well, perhaps you'll say $1 trillion is too much. I say, no, man. Whatever you say, tell me. What you say? You said 5 trillion, 6 trillion? Say 100 trillion. Oh, you'll get it. She says, I'll bring along the system figure. The system where you feed off of, the system where you depend upon, the system where you try to get to the top of. That system for scrape up $15 trillion and give you and your people them. Oh, the system will survive. In any event, since it's reparations, just go take it. Yeah, beg the man fee. Yeah, try to show the man calculation. Say, boy, lost of my language, Serious thing, The man did calculate for that. And him pay off who lose them labor. Throw him did that for free. So when you come to him now about these things, if you want it, take it. But you can't want to overthrow the system where I feed you. If the system was feeding you for a time that you couldn't put yourself in place to feed yourself from a different system, a self-sustaining system, a non-predatory system, a communal system, then so much better. But right now, you're with the people for 5 years until they can get a car loan, and then you're with them for another 15 years until you can get a mortgage. You have a mortgage now. You can't wear a dashiki to the staff party and make people start right to remember you lose your job and then put your house on the market, your wife left you, your picnic call you waste man. So you just bow and bow and bow and bow right through. But I just true you did like the 5% mortgage and the whatever car loan. So and when you enjoy them perks there from white man, you look on the rest of your fellows, thing and style them and all these things. It's I'm sorry, I don't mean to laugh.
No, you have the rest of us cracking up, trust me. But as we mentioned, the ethnic minorities in Jamaica and the way they practice their code switching. The truth is, when we compare our situation, we can't really afford to do a lot of the things we see them do. It's easier for a man to go to a 9 to 5 and pretend when his God looks like him, when he has his name is coming from his great 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 grandmother. We can't afford to necessarily run those kind of games because we don't know our language, we don't know our culture, we don't know our gods, right? So it's easy for easier, I should say, for an Indian person to go into an office and work for a few hours and go back home and fall back in line with their cultural norms. It's not so easy for us. When we leave the corporate world and come home, what are we gonna come home to? The very thing that we just spent years avoiding. People go to university to avoid their blackness, to be less black. As Tajay said, to stop getting beaten for speaking bad, right? We go to the barber so that we can look presentable, so that we can look more manly and less like a dirty boy or a careless boy. We look more intimidating. These are facts, you know. But I have a question. I hope Intifara can help me with this too. Um, or anyone can respond. So we are in a unique position in Jamaica where we had something called Rastafari emerging from our culture. And unlike other movements, we see where, even from Marcus Garvey, a deliberate attempt and move to adapt some kind of black masculinity. So we're coming from Don and King to calling, to using terms like Ras and Lidge. And I think we had a unique opportunity when it comes to this particular movement to embrace various forms of Eastern and African masculinity. But when we look at Rasta leaders now, we don't see we don't see where they're following in these footsteps or where they have capitalized on this uniqueness. I've said it before and I won't stop saying it. When I see a man like Sizzler dressing in a bow tie repeatedly, I have to ask myself why. What is it about black masculinity that they find so offensive? You're gonna tell me that you don't need to be quote unquote groomed like the white man to be taken seriously. So you grow your hair, you grow your beard. What happened to your African cloth? And it just seems like that unique cultural opportunity we had to embrace a form of masculinity that was non Eurocentric, we're slowly letting it go. Go ahead, Leighton.
Uh, Blaze up the chalwa and make me sex off them young girl, yeah. I'm sorry, but I think you were the second person that brought to me so forcefully the the Rasta man's white male patriarchal aspect. Uh, in spite of, ironically, all that he has sought to represent as an antithesis to Western norms. And all I'll say is it's very sad. I wonder if it's the Abrahamic root of their liturgy, because you know them use the same Bible, but or if it's something deeper, you know. But that's all I'll say at the moment.
Welcome to the stage, Tafara. Did you want to respond to that? Tifara, are you with us? Are you able to hear?
Oh, yes, I'm here.
Okay,
Sorry, I'm
great.
not used to Clubhouse, so I have to try and figure out how to turn it, the sound on, the mic on.
Yeah, I'm
Yes,
hearing you, but your voice is a little low, so you might have to project a bit.
you hearing me better now?
Much better, thanks.
Okay. Good night, everybody. So, about black men, and I say this all the time, that black men and black women, we both have our insecurities. It just shows up in different ways. And for black men, I see that it's mainly with the women that they choose. They tend to choose women who are light skinned, half white or white, anything away from, and even the ones who are so-called conscious, the reggae artists who speak about black woman all the time in their songs, in their music, they're praising black women and praising their mothers, but when they're choosing their women, it's always who is as close to white as possible. So they have the same insecurities that we do. It just shows up differently. Well, it does show up in the way that they dress as well, because for them, wearing the suits, the European suits, getting clean shaved, looking like, I don't know, the guys on GQ magazine, that is what they desire to look like. And I think it also comes from them watching a lot of these gangster movies and idolizing a lot of these Italian gangsters or mafias, and a lot of them dressed in that type of way. I think that is where a lot of them are copying that image from the Italian mafias, the gator shoes and the suits and the tie and the three-piece. I don't know much about European clothes, so I can't really describe it, but we know what it looks like, right? So at the end of the day, I was listening to the conversations earlier, and my contribution to the conversation is that um, black people are addicted to this system that we've been conditioned to live in. We've been doing it for so long. And like you said earlier, words sound power. If we're doing it, we're speaking it, we're participating in the system in every single way, we become addicted to it, and we want to um, I guess master it. And I guess in some ways, some people see that as a win, mastering it. Um, and some people are just addicted to it. They want it. They want everything that comes with it. They want all of the so-called success. They want to mimic European success, or what they value to be success. So I don't know. I don't know what the solution is. I know from myself personally, I don't desire to live in a system, in a capitalistic system. I don't desire to work my ass off for a system that they created that really only benefits them. And as you were saying before, even if one or two people become successful at it, then what? You become one of them, and then the other people are just your workers, your slaves, because they are still no better than they were before, even though you are in a better position, So I just don't think it's a system that is gonna benefit us ultimately, as a group, as a community. But we don't think communally anyway. Everybody is thinking individualistically. So it's the system that they've designed, and we'll always have people who do well at it and get close to being as like them as possible, and most of us just going to be in it struggling, and I refuse.
Thanks, Tiff. I've heard the argument that, as you mentioned, Italian gangsters and the alligator skinned shoes, that are so much of their fashion is copied from Africans. And I've heard that response to many of the arguments that we're making tonight, that, oh, there's no such thing as Eurocentric suits. We taught them how to dress, blah, blah, blah. Why I don't like that argument is that it is disingenuous. Because when African women, for example, when black women say, well, we gave the world makeup, sure, we gave the world makeup, but it would be a lie for us to say that painting our cheeks pink to mimic a blush when our skin don't blush pink. It would be disingenuous for us to say that that is not us copying white feminine makeup. So it's not enough to say we created. Yeah, we know everything. Most all good things are all fashionable things had its origin somewhere or the other in on the African continent. But to then go from that to say a tuxedo is an African invention is just extremely dishonest to me. But sorry, Leighton, I see you want to jump in.
They have to justify their aping of European norms by any means necessary. Did you know that the swastika was an ancient Eastern symbol that meant love, etc., etc.? So we'll use a swastika then, you know? they, I remember when Cartel said that his bleaching had nothing to do with black inferiority. Um, and so many people said, yes, 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 true, true, true. And I realize it's a particular strain of our derangement where we, whilst running pell-mell towards the European standard, upon being called out for it, we show how it evolved from Africa and therefore, or it originated in Africa and therefore it's not a European standard. Although there's no African standard as we run down that does not have a European, um, you know, legitimacy. So in that we're just full of shit. You're quite right.
Tajay, did you want to respond to what Tifara said? Oh, Tifara, sorry, you were going to speak again. Go ahead.
Oh no, sorry, accident.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Tajay.
Right. So I was just going to touch on the fact that, Tifara made some very valid, strong points as well. She touched on the fact that, she doesn't see herself really working for the white man. And I agree with her 100%. I mean, we all have to start somewhere. But once you would have developed the necessary skills, working for the white people or the Chinese people, people of different color, of different cultures and such, it just you branch off on your own and try to um, you know, maximize on the skill and try to make a living from it. I know of someone right now. They were working in corporate at Sagicor. Well, yeah, Sagicor. It's basically owned by a high collar man. Not sure if he's Jamaican, but he's high collar. So they would have worked at Sagicor for 5 years, 6 to 7 years in a senior position, being promoted multiple times within the organization. And they would have branched off because they were a finance major. So they would have branch off and do them little thing now, and the business is now it's a lucrative business that they are currently doing. So and it makes sense. I mean, once you're making money and can pay their bills and take care of everything, and have money left back to flip that money, it makes sense. So always root for persons who are doing that because I myself I am not working a 9 to 5 currently. I am doing my business as well. I mean, I wish not to work back in corporate, wish not to work for people because, I have to stop the BS and all of that. I've worked up to being a human resources manager, the managerial position, and persons tend to say to me from different companies, when we go to like seminars, you should be more firmer with the staff. You should be more firmer. And I always say to them, no. Remember that just as though they are replaceable, I am replaceable as well. Not because I'm a manager, I'm not replaceable. It's not my company, I don't own the place. So, I know my place and I know what I know. So I cannot pretend as if I am the boss of them. I'm not the boss of them because it's really the white man. Well, he's not white, but he's Chinese at the time. It's really the Chinese man that runs the company. It's his business, it's not mine. So for me to pretend as if it's mine, I'm the sole proprietor. I can't do that. So, yeah, I totally agree with Tifara. If you can find something else to do, yes, a career is good because I do have 2 degrees, but I try to be market. I try to make myself become marketable and well-rounded. So I would have experience at just 27 in various sectors, various fields and departments and such to try to make myself marketable to branch off, utilizing the skills to make money.
But you see, and thanks for that, Tajay. Part of the problem, and this is something that we all face, let's us be clear. We live under a global system of white supremacy. So we are by no means saying that we can completely avoid a lot of these pitfalls. In some ways we have to make, well, I wouldn't say we have to, but it's a fight. We're in a war. And in a war, you make concessions, you play dead, you play weak. It's all a part of war. The difference is many of us don't know that we are at war. We think it's the norm. Or better yet, we think we're at war with poor blacks. We don't know who we're really at war with. And so that's where the confusion lies. But you see, part of my concern with what you said, Tajay, is when we speak of becoming experts in fields and so that we can eventually leave a Sagicor, leave a NCB, leave a Sandals, leave a ATL, wherever, so that we can build our own. In many ways, we're perpetuating the same problem because the industries that we're going into are determined by whiteness. They're determined by the needs of capitalism. So why would I, an African person, leave a senior position at Sandals to go open my own resort? You see what I'm saying? So at some point, we're going to have to see it for what it is and make a decision for where and what direction we want to go into. It won't happen overnight. But one of the things that we're not doing specifically when it comes to the black male, black manosphere, black male talking points, black male speakers, we're not acknowledging what is happening. We're not being truthful. We're not being honest about our desires to mimic white men, to have their women, as Tifara says, the acknowledgement, praise from the women, the white women, right? We're not being honest when it comes to that. We're acting like to be a man in today's world doesn't mean to be a white man. You mentioned the book in the chat, Tajay, and I promise I'm not picking on you. It's just that your points raise so many other points. But, you recommended the 48 Laws of Power. And of course, it's a useful book. I've read it too. But at the end of the day, that book gives you skills on how to function in what he describes as the court. 90% of his examples is from Europe, you know? He only has one African example to my mind, which is Haile Selassie. Going back to what I said, that Rasta had a unique opportunity to enforce black masculine standards, and they did not. So, I don't know. I think it's a slippery slope when we talk about leaving their institutions as senior people, as well trained people to go and create our own. We really have to, because I don't want a gold mine. I don't desire to go to Congo and say, hey, Swiss guy, no man, you leave. I'm going to take over the mining. It's gonna be a black mining company. I don't want that. I don't want that. So we really have to decide, it's not just about the skill set, it's about the entire Eurocentric culture. Anybody else wanted to respond? Go ahead, Leighton.
Oh, yeah, man, I agree with you. And I really, I hate black capitalists. I'm sorry. I, I wonder if they can't see that capitalism is exploitative primarily of black people. And that to become a black capitalist only makes you join the ranks of exploiters of black people. Um, and that it's high time that we find a way to be commercially successful outside of capitalism. Within it, but outside of it.
Thanks, Leighton. Anyone else wants to respond?
Do you mean by that? Do you mean like the Chinese and like the Indians, Leighton? How? What would that look like? I'm curious.
Um, okay, so um, 20 odd years ago, when my grandmother died, uh, we're burying her in the country, somewhere in Manchester, Cheapside, Manchester. And a house was being constructed, and the house was going up fast. They were telling me that the house would be finished in 2 days. Um, all of the men in the community got together. The person whose house it is responsible simply for food, the food and drinks. Um, I don't know if he's responsible for the materials as well, but basically the whole community get together and build his house in 2 days, and so it is for all the houses built in that community. And I was like gobsmacked. I didn't know that happened anywhere in Jamaica, and I don't know the specific African retention that is, but I'm pretty sure it is. It's one, and there are several that we have: round robin, partner, things that help us along the way that we never recognize. We, it's like a white man would have to come and do a documentary on how wonderful round robins and partners are for us to say, yeah, yeah, you know how much people it help and what have you and what have you, but for our own selves, it's nothing. So once we start to respect what we have, we'll start to behave just like the Chinese, and well, not just like, because as Kishi rightly said, them have them language, them have them culture, them have them gods, them have them what have you. It's like the only thing we have are our well, I was gonna say our dances, but we have more than that. We just have to go back and but we have to appreciate our Africanness first.
Greetings, Lioness in the chat. Greetings, Lioness. Oh, she raised a question in the chat. I think it's very relevant. Has the discussion touched on why black men persist unknowingly and or unwittingly with their white daddy issues? Can it be avoided and or helped or even changed, transformed? Too deeply entrenched and far gone? Question mark. It is a foregone conclusion that this is just how the majority of black and other non-white men must operate within white patriarchy. I think it's a fair point. I think it's very important that we talk about why they have so much white daddy issues. But the problem I find, Linus, is there's an unwillingness to even admit that it exists. That's the biggest stumbling block I find when trying to get to the solution or get to the root of these issues. The average black man who is mimicking his white daddy or white patriarchy is going to tell you that he's simply being manly. There's just this is just what being manly is. And you're trying to emasculate them. Any suggestion that this form of masculinity that they've adapted to survive in patriarchy or to have some mythical power in patriarchy is toxic, is damaging to their women, damaging to children, damaging to the physical environment. They're gonna tell you that you're emasculating them. You don't want me to be a man? You don't want me to have 50 wives? I'm a man. I can do what I want. I can this, I can that. Their idea of masculinity is dominance and control, exploitation. And so just this is one of the reasons why I raised this topic tonight. Just to get them to face up or accept what Fela Kuti said in his song. I no be gentleman at all. I be African man, original. That is the first hurdle, and I don't think they are ready. Lioness says emotional dishonesty, emotional damage. Thanks, Tifaro. Great conversation. Yes, great having you. Right. So I just don't think they're ready to accept that. I don't think they're ready to accept or acknowledge that these accepted forms of masculinity are non-African, and not only are they non-African, they are extremely damaging to our community. What they would rather do is to point out the many ways in which black women have strayed from African femininity. And so I don't think we're going to get to the root of that very soon. But I could be wrong. Anyone wants to respond to Lioness's point? No one. Well, you know, it's a touchy issue, but it's one that we have to discuss. So we have to peel back the layers. We have to peel back the layers. As Michelle, who was here before, said, it's one thing to know that when I put on a wig, I am acting. But if I think the wig is actually representative of who I am, then that's where I'm completely lost. That is mental illness. And black men, when it comes to their masculinity, they're struggling with mental illness. They still think that Kevin Samuel's advice was correct. that they have to dress in three-piece suit and drink scotch to be like men. Their greatest heroes are violent Italian mobsters. Or for those who came before the mobsters, their heroes are westerns, cowboys. Imagine African men are siding with the cowboys against the Indians. That's who their heroes are. This thing is deep rooted in their psyche, but they don't want to admit it because they want to pretend that they're not following a white man's version of manhood. They want to pull the blinders that are on their eyes over your eyes. So when in every western they're rooting for the cowboy, they don't see the problem with that. They don't see that they're on the wrong side. And again, it could be, this whole alpha male philosophy. They want to be on the side of the winner. That's why nobody checked P. Diddy, because he was winning. He was wealthy. He was accumulating businesses, artists, power. So why check him? That's what a man does. A man makes moves. A man makes money. A man gives orders. A man slaps a hoe if necessary. That's what a man does. And if you say no, this is not this is white degeneracy, they're gonna tell you no, 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 no. And it's not limited to frivolous speakers like Kevin Samuels. I don't want us to get carried away with influencers and rappers. I often say that even our most esteemed leaders will tell you that feminism is a philosophy that you should avoid because it started with white women. But they will, in the same breath, turn around and call themselves Marxists and Leninists. You see, so the dissonance is deep. It's deep when you can't even acknowledge, as Kwame Ture eventually did, that communism, we have to Africanize it. When you can't even acknowledge that it's a white man's philosophy, it's problematic. It's problematic. So I'm going to allow everyone to give their final thoughts on the matter. I don't know if Lioness wants to give her final thoughts verbally or she wants to write it in the chat. But yes, let's hear everyone's final thoughts on the matter. Tajay, you want to go first? Okay, Tajay says he has to go. Leighton, what are your final thoughts on the matter?
Hello?
Yes, we're hearing you.
Okay, yeah, man. Well, my final thoughts are that every clubhouse I see the problem that you pose in for all its complexity, and it really seems like a difficult issue to solve. I think that to the extent that black men want to rise to power, and to the extent that they see this game as the only game in town, they will continue to chase after these norms as the only norm. And if you try to get them to harken back to African norms, They won't say it outright, but deep down they say, "But we were conquered. We were conquered," and that's that.
That's a very powerful point, Leighton. Um, so much of what we see is an admission of failure and an acceptance of the lie that we can't live within our culture as ourselves and be and thrive. I don't even want to use the word be successful, because so much of what is defined as being successful has nothing to do with us. But we can thrive within our own cultural norms of dress, of spirituality, of clothing, of an economic system. And each time we show up dressed as someone else, speaking as someone else, we give credit to the notion that we were conquered. And the only way to really be respected, admired, and to thrive in this world is to be like your conqueror. And so it's a shame. And I don't have the answers, certainly. It's a complex issue. But my intent is to start the conversation, because I don't see it happening. I don't see us turning the mirror to the faces of black men, of black leaders, and asking them to account for their inconsistencies. I'm tired of hearing about wigs, weaves, boss babes, modern women acting like white. I'm tired of hearing about that, because if we were to start to really act like African women, where are the African minded men? And so I just hope that this is a conversation that we can have more, that we can do some introspection as a people, that black men will start to introspect. And through that introspection, we can find some solutions. And so, unless there are any more comments that anyone would like to share, Kush, I see that you have removed your mic.
Yes,
Go
greetings,
ahead.
greetings, and greetings, everyone.
Okay, we seem to have lost Kush just at the very last minute. Not sure if there was a phone issue there, but thank you for everyone who joined. I really enjoyed this conversation. I think it's definitely something that we have to do a part two of, to really get to some solutions, because we all seem to be at a loss on the ways in which we can solve this problem. And so I look forward to our next discussion, our next podcast. Join me again next week for another discussion on the Truth Gangsters show. Have a good evening, everyone.